Have you ever noticed that many intelligent, disciplined people who invest well, read about personal finance, follow the market, and even make reasonably sound decisions, simply don't exceed $200,000 invested? Have you ever stopped to think about why this happens so frequently? It's not a coincidence, and most of the time, it has nothing to do with income, luck, or lack of knowledge. There's something much more silent at work here, an invisible pattern that almost no one notices while they're trapped in it. Perhaps you've already experienced this. You start investing, you establish consistency, you see your assets grow, you feel you're finally on the right path to wealth building. But then a point comes when everything seems to slow down. Contributions decrease, decisions become overly cautious, motivation fluctuates, and, without realizing it, you enter a kind of financial plateau. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. The curious thing is that this roadblock happens precisely at a critical moment in the investor's journey. The 200K mark isn't a magic number by chance. It represents a phase where the person has already done almost everything right, but hasn't yet crossed the shark gate. That world that only appears after 250K, when mindset, strategy, and decisions truly begin to change. Before that, there's an invisible barrier. And the most dangerous thing is that almost no one realizes when they're stuck in it. Many people believe that to get out of this rut, all you need to do is earn more money, find the perfect investment, or wait for the market to help. But the truth is that promising investors get stuck exactly here because they are repeating behaviors that no longer make sense for the next level. They continue to think like someone who needs to prove something, justify choices, or fit into external expectations. And this creates a silent brake on financial growth. This invisible pattern acts gradually. It appears in small decisions, in seemingly harmless expenses, in choices made more to maintain an image than to accelerate wealth building. It also appears in the fear of standing out, of changing pace, of seeming different from the people around you. Have you ever felt this? That strange feeling of making financial progress, but at the same time feeling uncomfortable with this progress? The problem isn't a lack of discipline or strategy. It's something deeper. It's a social and mental limitation that forms even before money reaches a new level. A limitation that keeps many people perpetually revolving around the same numbers, the same habits, and the same justifications. And as long as this pattern isn't identified, it continues to operate silently, holding back investors who had every opportunity to move forward. In a moment, we'll get to exactly that point, where this pattern originates, how it takes hold without you realizing it, and why it's the real obstacle. Before the shark gate, pay attention, because understanding this completely changes how you view this phase of your financial journey. And while we're talking about this, it's almost impossible not to recognize yourself at some point in this journey, because this invisible pattern isn't exclusive to other people. It appears precisely when everything seems to be going well, when the investor begins to realize they're moving away from the average, but still doesn't know exactly how to deal with this new situation. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has resonated with you the most so far. Sometimes, putting it into words helps you see more clearly where you are on this journey. Perhaps you're right at that transition point, feeling like something is holding you back, even though you're doing almost everything right. Or maybe you've already been through this phase, and now, looking back, you recognize how much certain decisions were influenced by fear, comparison, or the need for acceptance. Sharing this isn't just venting, it's an exchange. When you comment, other people going through the same thing realize they're not alone. And that strengthens everyone who is trying to build wealth consciously. If this content is making you think, like the video. It seems simple, but this gesture shows the algorithm that this type of conversation needs to reach more people who are stuck in that same invisible place. That's how this message continues to circulate and reach those who don't even know what's holding back their own financial growth. And if you feel that this type of reflection is something you want to continue following, subscribe to the channel. The idea here is to talk about wealth building in a way that almost no one else does, exploring precisely those silent phases before the shark door. Your subscription helps the channel continue producing this content with depth, consistency, and honesty. Because understanding where you are now is just the beginning. Soon, we'll delve into the social error that keeps promising investors revolving around the same numbers, and why breaking free from that completely changes the game. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this is where many people get lost without realizing it. There's a social error that seems small, almost harmless, but has a huge impact on the journey of anyone trying to build real wealth. This error occurs when you continue to shape your financial decisions not based on what makes sense for your future, but to please others, to belong, or simply not to stand out from the environment you're in. And this acts as a silent, constant, almost invisible brake. The problem is that human beings are social by nature. We learn, grow, and make decisions within groups. However, at a certain point in the financial journey, the same environment that welcomed you at the beginning starts to hold you back. You begin to make choices that have nothing to do with strategy or rationality, but with fear of judgment, expenses that arise simply to maintain appearances, purchases that weren't planned, but everyone does, decisions postponed because growing too fast might create discomfort for those around you. This manifests itself in very practical ways. It's the fear of being seen as stingy when, in reality, you're just prioritizing contributions. It's the feeling that talking less about money and acting less differently is safer socially. It's avoiding bolder changes because they might put you in an awkward position outside the group's norm. And little by little, this behavior shapes your mindset, your decisions, and even the speed of your financial progress. The most dangerous thing is that this social error doesn't look like an error. It disguises itself as common sense, balance, normal life. But behind the scenes, it sabotages long-term decisions. It makes you trade impact for immediate comfort. Trade, transformation for acceptance. And this weighs heavily precisely when your assets begin to demand a different kind of attitude, a different way of thinking, a different level of awareness. Promising investors get stuck here because they keep making decisions by looking sideways instead of looking ahead. Deep down, they know they could accelerate, adjust course, and take positions more aligned with the future they desire. But something holds them back. It's not a lack of information. It's an internal conflict between growing and belonging, between moving forward and not straying too far, between adopting a new mindset and keeping their social identity intact. This is a hidden truth that almost no one talks about. Before your money can grow consistently, your relationship with your environment needs to change, not aggressively, nor by breaking with everything, but consciously. Because if you don't recognize this social flaw, it will continue to guide your decisions behind the scenes, determining how much you can or cannot advance. And then the financial journey becomes a repetitive cycle, where the effort exists, but the leap never happens. When you start to see this, something changes. You begin to realize that certain choices are not neutral, that maintaining the same social standard has an invisible cost, that the true impact of financial decisions doesn't appear in the short term, but accumulates over time. And it is precisely at this point that the journey begins to demand more clarity, more responsibility, and a different mindset than average. If this resonates with you, leave a comment below. That makes sense to me. This simple sentence already shows that you are paying attention to what happens beyond the numbers, beyond the spreadsheets, beyond the obvious. And this awareness is an essential part of the path we are exploring here. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there's a point in the journey that almost no one describes. Honestly, it's the moment when growing up starts to hurt even before it makes sense. It's not financial pain. It's an internal, silent pain that appears when you realize you're changing inside, but the world around you remains exactly the same. This is the financial loneliness that arises before reaching 250K, and it catches many people by surprise. You start to think differently, not because you become better than anyone else, but because your decisions begin to consider impact, time, and consequence. Things that once seemed normal now start to sound incoherent. Expenses lose their luster, shortcuts lose their charm, repetitive conversations begin to tire you, and little by little, your priorities change. What was once urgent becomes noise. What was once a desire becomes a distraction. But this internal transformation doesn't happen comfortably. Conversations no longer flow as they once did. You realize that certain topics go in circles, that some complaints have been repeated. For years, that certain worldviews no longer resonate with the mindset that is forming within you. And this creates a conflict that is difficult to explain, because at the same time that you feel you are evolving, you also feel a certain isolation. It's not physical loneliness, it's a loneliness of perception. It's being present, but feeling like you're on a different frequency. This discomfort is often interpreted as something wrong. Many people think they are becoming cold, distant, or even arrogant. But the hidden truth is different. Before the money grows, the discomfort grows first. Before the external change appears, the internal change has already begun. And this friction is a clear sign that something is reorganizing itself behind the scenes of your journey. The problem is that nobody prepares the investor for this stage. There's a lot of talk about strategies, numbers, assets, but almost nothing about the emotional impact of the decisions that precede a real leap in wealth. Growing requires giving up certain standards, certain validations, certain social certainties, and that affects your identity. You start to wonder if it's worth continuing, if it wouldn't be easier to slow down, if it wouldn't be better to go back to normal. This is where many give up without realizing it. But this internal conflict is not a mistake. It's an indicator. It shows that your mindset is shifting, that your vision is broadening, that your decisions are beginning to align with something greater than immediate comfort. This unease doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. Often it means the exact opposite. It means you're going through a phase that demands emotional maturity, clarity, and quiet courage. When you understand this, something changes in how you view this phase. Loneliness ceases to be a burden and becomes a space for building. Silence ceases to be emptiness and becomes strategic. And revelations begin to appear not as ready-made answers, but as small confirmations that the journey is progressing, even if it is not yet visible to anyone but you. If this excerpt from the conversation describes something you've felt or are feeling now, comment below. I'm on this journey too. This helps to give a name to a process that many people experience, but almost no one verbalizes. And this awareness is an essential part of the path that continues to unfold from here. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this is where many people finally begin to see what truly separates those who keep revolving around the same numbers from those who are going through a new stage of their journey. The shark door doesn't open when your net worth reaches a specific value. It opens when something changes inside, when your mental and social posture stops being guided by external validation and starts being guided by internal clarity. After that boundary is broken, the feeling is strange at first. There's no visible milestone, no applause, no immediate recognition. What exists is a silent shift in decisions. You begin to feel less need to explain your choices. It no longer matters so much whether someone agrees or not. External validation loses its power because you understand, behind the scenes, the reasons behind your own decision. This brings a different, almost disconcerting calmness. Decisions become more detached, not in the sense of lacking emotion, but in the sense of maturity. You begin to analyze the impact before acting, the consequence before reacting. Short-term thinking ceases to dominate your reasoning. The noise diminishes, not because the world has become quieter, but because your mindset has changed. What once seemed urgent is now merely optional. What once seemed indispensable is now just an appearance. And it is at this point that the focus shifts completely. The construction becomes more important than the display. The process becomes more valuable than the narrative you tell others. You understand that true growth requires periods of invisibility, choices that no one sees, and decisions that don't generate conversation. This is a powerful revelation because it liberates. It liberates from constant comparison, from social pressure, from the need to prove something. When you look back, you realize that the 200K was never a financial ceiling. It was the ultimate social test, a test to see if you would continue making decisions to fit in, or if you would have the courage to maintain a new stance, even if it meant temporary discomfort. Few people talk about this because it doesn't show up in spreadsheets, it doesn't fit into graphs, and it doesn't yield ready-made motivational phrases. But the impact of this change is profound. The shark gate represents that turning point. It's not about feeling superior, it's about feeling responsible. Responsible for your own choices, your own pace, your own journey. It's understanding that not everyone will keep up with your transformation. And that's okay. That not every environment will make sense from now on. And that's okay too. What's unacceptable is continuing to make big decisions based on small criteria. When this mindset takes hold, something reorganizes itself. Decisions begin to align. External noise loses its power. The journey ceases to be a social competition and becomes a personal commitment. And that's when growth stops being forced and starts to be a consequence. Not because it became easy, but because it became coherent. If this part of the conversation resonated with something you've already noticed or are starting to notice now, leave a comment below. I saw the door. This shows that you are attentive to changes that don't appear in the numbers, but define everything that comes after. And this awareness prepares the ground for the next step in this journey that is still unfolding. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because after seeing the shark door, a practical question arises that almost no one answers clearly. How to continue growing without turning it into conflict, without fighting with anyone, and without creating unnecessary ruptures? The answer lies in a silent, discreet adjustment that happens more in posture than in words. It's not about cutting people off, radically changing circles, or adopting a defensive attitude. It's about consciously adjusting exposure and influence. There's a hidden truth in this phase of the journey. Not everyone needs to understand your decisions. And the sooner you accept this, the lighter the path becomes. Many financial self-sabotages don't stem from technical errors, but from the constant attempt to explain yourself, justify your choices, and convince those who aren't experiencing the same internal transformation. Over-explaining is tiring, drains energy, and gradually begins to influence decisions that should be made in silence. True growth requires periods of silence. Silence about plans, about numbers, about strategic moves. Not because there's anything wrong with sharing, but because not every environment is fertile ground for certain processes. Some ideas need to mature away from immediate opinions. Some decisions need space to happen without interference. This silence is not isolation, it's protecting one's own journey. Your mindset changes when you understand that you don't need collective approval to move forward. You start to choose better where you speak, with whom you speak, and, most importantly, when not to speak. This reduces noise, decreases friction, and preserves your clarity. The impact of this appears in your daily decisions, in how you handle invitations, expectations, and comparisons. You stop reacting and start choosing. Behind the scenes, this adjustment is profound. You begin to realize that growing up doesn't require confrontation, but coherence. It doesn't require lengthy explanations, but consistency. It doesn't require distancing yourself from everything, but understanding boundaries. Some relationships continue, others change form, and some simply cease to influence your decisions. All of this happens without announcement, without drama, without the need to prove anything. This is one of the most liberating revelations of this stage. You don't need to explain yourself to evolve. Those who need to understand with time. Those who don't understand now perhaps aren't going through the same process, and that's not a problem. The real risk is continuing to make big decisions based on small dynamics, just to keep everything comfortable around you. When you make that silent adjustment, something aligns. The journey becomes lighter, decisions become firmer, and transformation happens with less resistance. Not because the world has changed, but because your relationship with it has changed. And that's when many realize, perhaps for the first time, that the blockage was never in the strategy, the market, or the lack of opportunity. Perhaps the problem was never your strategy. Perhaps it was the environment in which you insist on remaining the same. If this reflection resonated with something you've experienced or are experiencing in the past, please comment below. I'm adjusting the environment. This simple phrase carries more awareness than it seems, and opens the way for the next step in this journey that continues to unfold. If you've made it this far, it's because this conversation has truly resonated with you. And when content stays with us like this, it's worth acknowledging. If this video helped you see something that was previously unclear, leave a like. Not as an automatic gesture, but as a sign that this exchange made sense to you too. If you want to continue exploring this type of reflection, subscribe to the channel. The idea here is to keep delving deeper into these topics that almost no one addresses, always with clarity, honesty, and practical utility for your journey. And right here in the comments, I'm with you until the end, so I know that this message arrived correctly on the other side. There's a video over here that perfectly complements this topic and helps connect the next points in this journey. Click on it and continue with me there.